Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fiber Broadband Association's Five for Breakfast. We're now on our 17th episode of 2026. The gold sponsor for Fiber Breakfast is Conducts. I'm going to be in Minnesota this week. Today I'll be with Bree Mackey as the Minnesota Office of Broadband Development will be holding the Broadband Connecting One 2026 Broadband Summit in Minneapolis, where I'll be speaking with my good friend Joey Winder and a number of other industry colleagues. Then tomorrow I'll be speaking at a Build America, Buy America, BABA, event hosted at Clearfield in Minneapolis. It's great to finally see BEAD money flowing across the nation. Currently all 56 states and territories have submitted their final proposals to NDI for review, 54 of which NTI has approved, and NIST has approved 52. So 46 states and territories have signed and returned their award agreements, and they are off to the races. With respect to the over $20 billion in BEAD, quote, non-deployment funds, last week during the congressional hearing, Secretary Ludnick loosely suggested it'll be a few months before NTI issues guidance. We expect the NTI guidance for this funding will include a cleanup round to ensure that no unserved or underserved location is left behind, and provide funding for permitting and workforce development, among some other things. So we're looking forward to seeing that guidance. We're now just 2.5 weeks out from our annual Fiber Connect 2026 conference at the Gaylord Palms in Orlando from May 17th to 20th. Registration is on record pace, well ahead of last year. Just a ton of network operators that are coming. And if you haven't registered, please do so ASAP, because you're not going to want to miss it. And last week on Five for Breakfast, our guests were Jamie Linderman and Elzbieta Feldenbaum from Omdia, who discussed their latest research on beyond speed, competing in a mature broadband market. Our research experts shared with us that speed and price still matter, but reliability and security and customer service will become increasingly critical for network operators, as they will be competing against other network operators and other fiber operators. If you missed last week's session, you can go to our website and watch the replay. Today on Five for Breakfast, our guests are our good friends, David Strauss and Jack Burton from BSP Technical Advisors, to discuss the fiber network consolidation wave. Are you ready? David Strauss is a principal and co-founder of BSP, a leading digital infrastructure M&A technical advisor and due diligence specialist across networks and data centers. David and Jack founded BSP in 2017 and have completed over 140 projects for 75 plus clients worldwide. Jack Burton is a principal and co-founder of BSP. Prior to co-founding BSP, Jack was senior director of system engineering for Altice USA and Cablevision Systems. Jack served as a chairman of Cable Labs Packet Certification Board from 2011-2017. So welcome, Dave and Jack. And for our audience, please type in your questions as we go, and we'll work those in discussions. With that, let's get things started.
Great. Thanks very much, Gary. Let me give you a little bit of background on BSP, and then I'll hand the baton to Jack to talk about network integration as it relates to the ongoing consolidation wave that has already begun. So Jack and I founded BSP in late 2017. And as Gary alluded to, we've been very active, predominantly with fiber networks, though we are also active in some of these other technologies or sectors, as you can see here, predominantly in North America, but also active in Europe and Latin America. We all come from the operator side, having built networks, managed and operated networks, expanded networks, as well as data centers. And a number of our clients, in particular T-Mobile, have been active in stimulating, if you will, the consolidation wave that we're all currently seeing. So with that, I will hand it over to Jack.
Thank you, David. Yes, as David said, we've been doing this for a few years, since 2017. And this presentation is going to be talking about fiber market consolidation, what happens when one operator acquires another operator, maybe with similar technologies or maybe with very different technologies. So we're going to talk about the integration of two or more networks. By integrating those networks, it's hoped that the new owner can achieve some economies of scale, can take the best parts of the network they're acquiring and integrate it with their existing technologies, procedures, policies, and staff. And there may be challenges to doing that. Whether this is easy or difficult depends largely on the technologies that you're trying to integrate. We'll look at first what happens when an operator that's running a fiber network adds another company that also operates a fiber network. Then we'll look at a fiber operator adding a HFC network. And lastly, fiber operator adding a copper or DSL network. So in the first case, the nice thing about fiber networks, at least for residential, they're all very similar. Everyone, and pretty much 100% of all residential fiber networks use the FSAN, Fiber Service Area Network architecture, where you have a central location, usually at a central office or a remote cabinet, that feeds a splitter located either at the cabinet or somewhere out in the network, or maybe multiple splitters located in many places in the network, feeding a bunch of homes. That number of homes may vary. A traditional FSAN is 32 homes, but it might be 64 or 128 or some other number in between, depending on how the network is architected. But the fundamental architecture of having a splitter feeding lots of homes is the same. The reach of that network varies depending on the number of splits. Usually it's somewhere around 20 kilometers from the equipment location. Since you can see that on the left we have the operator's old network and on the right the network they're acquiring, you can see they're identical. So network-wise, it's the same thing. But when you do integrate two different fiber networks, there are other things to consider. Let's take a look. So the network architecture using PON, using the FSAN network, no problem there. You might have one network using GPON, which is the old 2.4 gigabit maximum trunk capacity standard used traditionally by fiber networks, or XGS-PON, which is a 10 gigabit per second standard used in more modern networks. If your new network uses a different network, a different type of PON standard from what you're currently running, there may be some integration challenges. Fortunately, though, with XGS-PON and GPON, they can both coexist on the same fiber. So you can kind of do an upgrade from GPON to XGS-PON without replacing all at once all of your GPON gear. You can run both technologies on the same network and migrate over time. You also might have two networks using the same standard. Let's say they're both using XGS-PON, but they're using different brands of equipment. Now, in theory, a PON standard should be interoperable, but we all know that they're not. For example, if you're using vendor C and your acquired system is using vendor A or vendor N, you may have to consider doing some interoperability testing, and you might have to do some software work to get those two different technologies to interoperate. In some cases, you might not be able to interoperate, and you'll have to run two different technology stacks. That can be a challenge. You can run two technology stacks and migrate over time, or just keep using two technologies. What you will be able to reuse, though, is that physical fiber network itself. You can reuse the back office networks. You can reuse your backhaul circuits, and continue that indefinitely. Those don't have to change. You'll also be able to, or you'll need to look at integrating your OSS/BSS and your Network Operations Center. You'll want to have one single platform for billing, one single platform for customer management. If you're running two different technology stacks, you might end up with two different systems for provisioning, but usually two provisioning systems can still talk to the same overlying customer management system. If you have multiple network operations centers, you might want to combine them, or you might want to run both of them so that you can use the new network operations center to achieve redundancy or backup for your old network operations center. If you're doing a new build, and most people are, you'll want to integrate your build practices and platforms for keeping your plant records. So you might want, let's say you're using two different GIS systems, you might want to consider consolidating into one. And we already mentioned upgrading to XGS-PON. Again, that's a moderate CapEx because you don't have to do it all at once and you don't have to do all your CPE at once. And what challenges can you have? Well, we talked about having different IT systems. Again, I mentioned the different PON standards, and you might have different operations standards. One other thing to consider is the philosophy for how you build your PON network. Some operators might use a centralized split approach where they have hubs built feeding large numbers of customers and splitting very close to or at the hub site, while others might use distributed split out in the field. We found that the distributed split type of architectures work best the more rural the system becomes, whereas with more urban situations, centralized split seems to work better. Another reason for that is with centralized split, it's much easier to take some fibers out of the PON and use them for dedicated Ethernet service for business customers that might want that. So when you're doing fiber to fiber, you want to have an experienced project management and targeted network diligence effort, not just the back office, but look at everything to realize the synergies between the new and old, document both networks thoroughly. And we already mentioned that different optical electronics may require some effort for interoperability, and some might interoperate fine just as is. But again, it's testing that will determine that. So let's go on to our second scenario, where a fiber operator acquires a cable operator. This is a lot more difficult because the architectures are quite different. While it may seem similar, where you have an HFC network with fiber feeding a fiber node, and then you have coax feeding the homes, that's where the similarities end, where the coax feed the homes. With a fiber network, you have fiber feeding the homes where you have a fiber drop to every house. In a coax network, you definitely don't. So there you have a lot more differences in the plant architecture to consider, and you have to consider whether you want to keep operating that coax network or whether you want to overbuild it with a fiber network. And here we go into what we consider when we do due diligence for every coax network. Can the coax network achieve the speeds and reliability that customers want and need over the next few years or many years? And we have to look at what kind of coax network is being operated. Is it currently a DOCSIS 3.0 network or a DOCSIS 3.1 network, or perhaps maybe a DOCSIS 4.0 network. There are very few of those these days. And each of these different coax networks has different speed capabilities. Even the most modern DOCSIS 4.0 network can only hope to compete on a level similar to XGS-PON. Even a fiber DOCSIS 4.0 coax network, a coax DOCSIS 4.0 network can't achieve 10 gigabits symmetrical, at least not today. But they can come pretty close and certainly could achieve 10 gigabits downstream. A more common DOCSIS 3.0 or 3.1 network, they have challenges even getting to single gigabit symmetrical, but maybe that's enough. With DOCSIS 3.1, you could certainly do multiple gigabit downstream and 1 gigabit upstream if you have the right upstream downstream split. And doing that or upgrading to that is a very modest upgrade compared to doing a complete fiber overbuild. You also have all the other stuff we already talked about, your OSS/BSS system, your network operations center, etc. All of that needs to be worried about when you're doing a fiber acquisition of a coax operation. Fiber, when you migrate to fiber, not only do you have to upgrade the network, you also have to roll trucks to every location, every customer, and swap them over, changing their CPE from coax equipment to fiber equipment. That has proven to be the largest challenge with operators that have attempted to migrate from from coax to fiber. This process can sometimes take years as individual appointments need to be made with each customer to get into their home and change out their equipment. So it's a very difficult transition to go from coax to fiber. I mentioned this before. Coax training is a little different than fiber. Actually, it's a lot different. You have to have people with different experiences. But with most HFC operators today, their technicians are experienced with fiber. So that training is not that hard. It's much harder to go the other way and take a fiber technician and train them for coax. So as I mentioned before, if the plant is relatively modern, going from, say, DOCSIS 3.1 to DOCSIS 3.1 extended, where you only increase the maximum bandwidth to 1.2 gigahertz, you get rid of all the video on the plant, the QAM video using digital carriers on the RF, change that to IPTV, then your CapEx can be kept very low compared to doing a fiber overbuild. Whether you have a DOCSIS 3.1 or DOCSIS 3.0 or any of the earlier versions, going to DOCSIS 4.0 will be expensive because there you will have to change your plant to very, very short maximum cascades, and you'll have to upgrade your plant bandwidth to 1.8 gigahertz. Doing that requires that you change out the taps, and that can be very disruptive and very expensive. So really the question is, how soon will you need these extra capabilities that FTTH would offer? If the answer is something less than 10 years, well, you may want to get started on that FTTH overbuild. Lastly, what happens when a fiber operator acquires a copper telco? Well, here it's actually pretty simple. Let's go back to the architecture for a second. They look similar, where you have fiber running out to your DSLAM. That might be at a central office, or it's more than likely in a remote cabinet. And then from there, you have copper pairs going out to the homes. The shape is similar, but that's really where the similarity ends. One nice thing is many of these DSLAMs can also function as ONT cabinets, maybe even by just changing cards. So you might save some money there. But the important thing to note is that with a DSL network, you're going to have to replace that network with fiber to the home. There's really no way around it. You really can't use that copper twisted pair last mile for anything useful in today's multi-gigabit environment. So treat this as if it's a new build. One big difference, though, between this and a real new build is that you already have the pole infrastructure. You might be able to overlash the fiber on top of the copper. So you might be able to save on any pole licensing. Certainly, if you own the poles, you're not worrying about pole licensing. And as I mentioned, those DSLAM cabinets become good ONT locations. Sometimes you're able to reuse the cabinet. Sometimes you can reuse the equipment with new cards. But in any event, you can reuse that fiber architecture as your backhaul network, going from your ONTs back to your COs. And again, there's all the other things that we mentioned before. These are the same. Migrating to a unified OSS/BSS. Many of the telco DSL-based OSS/BSS systems can also function just fine with fiber to the home. Building the fiber infrastructure does have a lot of CapEx behind it, but you'll reduce your OpEx in the long term because copper pairs, you have to worry about corrosion, water damage. Fiber, you don't. You may have some problems with unionized workforce or rigid procedures, but those would be encountered probably regardless as time passes and people migrate away from copper networks. But again, you'll have these OpEx benefits when you finally do migrate to fiber. As I mentioned, the copper networks have a high upkeep. Besides the water problems with corrosion, copper pairs degrading, you could get lightning damage with copper. So again, you'll have some OpEx savings when you do go to fiber. There are some regulatory problems sometimes with retiring copper in a telco environment. You have to be cognizant of these. Sometimes you might have to keep copper running because of regulatory obligations. Sometimes you'll just have the challenges of migrating that last customer who doesn't want to lose their copper pair or doesn't even want to be bothered with a technician visit. So to sum up, these are the degrees of difficulty we estimated on a scale of 1 to 5 for doing these different migrations. Of course, the technology integration is very hard when you're going from fiber to cable or fiber to copper. OSS/BSS about the same. And then we looked at the CapEx needs and timelines. So in summary, the data quality can make or break integration, whether your plant records are good or bad. Your GIS maps, your inventory, those are all key for having a smooth transition from one type of network to another. Sharing the OSS/BSS systems is important. We talked about that before. Network inventories. Well, one of the things when you acquire, this is most prevalent for another fiber operator. If you acquire another fiber operator, you might be able to reuse their equipment. You might be able to now purchase larger quantities, and you might be able to share equipment from one network to another, resulting in total smaller inventories. And of course, you want to share your training methods and reduce the amount of documentation. This integration is important, or you won't be able to achieve the economies of scale that you want to get out of a merged network. David, I'll let you do the conclusion. You're muted, David.
Sorry. Thanks, Jack. That was great. So in conclusion, integration readiness and a successful integration are not automatic. It does require, as you heard from Jack, considerable planning and execution. The type or types of networks being sold or acquired, you shape the playbook itself. And thirdly, value is realized or it is lost through the level of operational alignment. So for the acquirer, that might be you, focus, diligence, experience, integration management, and early attention to customer impact make the difference. There you have it.
Well,
Thank you.
I mean, it's great, guys, because I mean, it's very timely. So we've been in the midst of this largest fiber investment cycle in history, and the last FCC data showed there's 1,561 fiber providers now, and they even since the last revision 6 months ago, we saw 42 new entrants into the market. So we have a wild and woolly market with lots of operators, and that's not even talk about all the, as you mentioned, the copper guys and the cable guys. So why are we in this moment? Is this, what do network operators have to think about? Should they all be thinking that we are getting to the moment where consolidation, we're up the S curve and now we're going to be in a consolidation phase, and either the music's about to stop and you need to find your partner to either scale or to be part of someone else's network? Is that the way operators should be thinking?
Well, I'm thinking that if you're not already operating a fiber network, you should certainly be considering upgrading to a fiber network, or at least upgrading your HFC network to achieve the performance similar to a fiber network. And if you can't afford or can't get the capital to do either of those things, then you should look to maybe consolidation. Maybe it's time to get acquired by someone that can.
So, and on that last point, being ready for that is critical, right? If you make the decision that you're going to be, acquired at some point, you obviously want to be an attractive candidate. So that's why you need to take the steps, that some of which have been outlined here.
Well, I mean, if I look at, so I'm going to be talking with Jackie Wu of Brightspeed at the C-suite at Fiber Connect. And, Brightspeed created $6 billion, of value from turning the old Lumen CenturyLink copper assets into fiber. So why would a network operator, like even a cable guy, why wouldn't a cable guy be going as fast as possible to fiber? Do you see a discount if a would-be acquirer one, just be attracted to a network that's not fiber? They're going to give a discount saying, hey, okay, we acquire this DOCSIS network. It's going to cost a lot of money. And then if you do acquire it, why would you upgrade from 3.1 to 4.0? Isn't that going to be super expensive? And you don't have the OpEx benefits of fiber.
Would you like me to take that, David?
Yeah, go right ahead, Jack.
Okay. Well, a number of coax operators are our clients, and they do have rationale for staying with HFC. The main reason is the CapEx required to give them very good, I won't say excellent, I won't say fiber equal, but very good performance on their coax is so much less than doing a complete fiber overbuild, that they believe that they can make these modest CapEx investments and still retain their customers or expand to have new customers, providing multi-gigabit downstream speeds and perhaps single gigabit upstream speeds, while spending on the order of $100 per home or less.
So you think the valuation difference, so spending $100 to get to 4.0 versus $750 to get to fiber to the home. We were seeing, like in Brightspeed, it's like $1,500 valuation per fiber to the home sub. So you would double your valuations. Is that jive with kind of your numbers?
Maybe, but maybe their concern is not so much their valuation, but their revenue.
Yeah.
Maybe they're looking just to maintain their monthly subscriber payments for a long time, and not so much worry about what happens when they sell.
All right, so quick, just kind of last question here is,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
We used to think about having contiguous networks, right? Because, where your knock was and, having new truck rolls and stuff like that. But now these days with distributed, having be able to have remote knocks and less dependency on truck rolls, as people are going to scale, do they have to look at contiguous networks, or can they just pick up great markets anywhere and be able to pull that together?
Well, that's something that's happened, I guess, over the past 10 to 15 years. Everything is fed via Ethernet, whether it's an HFC network or a fiber network or even a copper DSLAM network. They can be isolated islands fed with leased circuits if need be. So you don't really need contiguous networks. In the case of an HFC network, obviously, where you make that transition from fiber to coax, from that point on has to be a contiguous network. But up until that point, you could even have a distributed access architecture coax network fed via leased circuit if you wanted to.
All right. This is the real last question because I don't want to lose this one. Since David,
Sure.
You guys are working a lot with data centers now and AI, and we are seeing such a demand on fiber from AI data centers. How does that, does it impact the way that a network operator should think about how they need to invest in their network?
No, great question, Gary. We've worked on some of those data center to data center connectivity businesses, looked at them, and it's, what we've seen is largely dark fiber, which makes sense in that instance, right, between hyperscaler data centers. So if that's a natural area to expand into for an existing fiber provider, and it could well be, they should pay attention to that, because the demand for that fiber connectivity, and they're already experts when it comes to that, will continue to grow. So it's something they should look at, and if it makes sense relative to where the data centers are being built and where their network exists, it's definitely worth further investigation and potentially investment. So it's needless to say, a pretty hot area. I though want to come back very quickly to your 2 questions ago, if you don't mind. And that is that the valuations on the copper and cable networks could be such in a particular instance where it makes sense for a fiber operator to make that purchase. And over time, there's no doubt there will be an upgrade. But the question is when and how and at what cost. But so that the M&A dynamics will vary depending upon the particular situation. But, down the road or at some point in time, it should be all fiber, we believe.
Yeah, so like in a case of a Brightspeed where they're picking up assets very inexpensively and investing to upgrade those. So if you have a network and you're getting acquired, you're going to get the lowest possible valuation because your acquirer is going to use that low valuation for the thesis to be able to afford the upgrades over time.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So if you want the maximum valuation, you want to have a network that is going to be the simplest to integrate, going to be up, grade A as far as the quality of the network, and just make the integration process so you can immediately see benefits from scale.
Exactly.
Capture that?
Exactly. Yep.
All right. Well, guys,
Agreed.
Always super interesting. You guys are always in the right place. And I look forward to seeing Jack and his panel at Fiber Connect. And David, you'll have to figure a way down there because you're going to definitely be missing out.
Well, we appreciate the opportunity here, Gary. Thank you.
Yeah. And I hope everybody joins us next week, next Wednesday. Our guest is my good friend, Alan Isfan of AI Squared. He's a AI expert and is going to talk about the 4th pillar in the AI era. So if you really want to know what AI means to our fiber networks, you're not going to want to miss that session. Thanks, everyone. And we'll see you guys next Wednesday and definitely at Fiber Connect.